The announcement came the next morning. Commander Sam Hadley stood on the main platform of Long Watch Station and looked out at the faces of 4,000 people. Marines, engineers, scientists, cooks, medics, mechanics, every person who kept the station running and the rift contained. They stood in the wide central hall, shoulder to shoulder, and waited. Hadley did not use notes. He kept his voice steady and clear. As of 0600 this morning, the United Earth Defense Council has ordered the full withdrawal of all human military and scientific personnel from Sector 77 Kale. This order is effective immediately. We will begin packing operations today. All equipment, data, and materials will be secured and transported. The harmonic disruptor network will be powered down. We are going home. The silence that followed was heavy. Then it broke. They were the ones who had counted every day of their deployment and dreamed of going back to Earth. Others just stared, confused, not yet understanding what the words meant. And some, the ones who had been here the longest, who had given years of their lives to this place, stood perfectly still with anger building behind their eyes. Dr. Paul Whitman pushed through the crowd and caught Hadley at the edge of the platform. He was a thin man with dark circles under his eyes and the kind of intensity that made people uncomfortable in small rooms. "Commander, this is insane," Paul said, not bothering to lower his voice. "We have 60 years of research here. We have the only working containment system for the rift in existence. If we shut down the disruptors and walk away, the hollow will be loose within weeks." "I know," Hadley said. "Then why are we doing this?" Hadley looked at him for a long moment. "Because we were ordered to. That is the only answer I can give you right now." Paul opened his mouth to argue further, but something in Hadley's expression stopped him. The commander was not happy about this either. Later that day, in his office, Hadley told Katie Marsh the truth, or at least as much of it as he understood. He pulled up the classified message on his screen and let her read it. The key phrase was buried in the middle of a page of military language, a fundamental reassessment of humanity's obligations to non-treaty partners who have demonstrated sustained hostility toward Earth's strategic interests. Katie read it twice. "They are pulling us out because the Council kept insulting us?" "That is the short version, yes. 60 years of work, 1,100 people dead since the first mission, and we are leaving because some alien politician hurt our feelings?" Hadley leaned back in his chair. "It is more than hurt feelings, Katie. For 60 years, we have funded this operation ourselves. We have trained our own people, built our own ships, developed our own weapons. The Council has never paid a single credit toward any of it. And every year, Vorath and his friends get up on that floor and call us thieves and liars and warmongers. Every year, they block our membership vote. Every year, they put new restrictions on our trade routes." He paused. Someone back home finally decided enough was enough. The withdrawal began that same day. It was slow and careful work. The engineers started with the outer sensor platforms, pulling them in one by one and loading them onto transport ships. The scientists backed up every byte of data onto secure drives and then wiped the station's databases clean. The Marines disarmed the perimeter defenses and crated the pulse lances and harmonic rounds. Danny Voss helped carry equipment to the loading bays and tried not to think about what they were doing. But thinking was hard to avoid when he could see the rift through every viewport, still there, still glowing, still full of things that wanted to kill everything on the other side. He found Meg Kohler in the armory, packing weapons into foam-lined cases with the efficient movements of someone who had done this before. "Sarge, this does not feel right," he said. Meg did not look up. "Lots of things do not feel right, Voss. Does not mean they are wrong. We are leaving those people out there with no protection. The Pelori, the Tivrani, they cannot fight the Hollow. Nobody can, except us." Meg stopped packing. She straightened up and looked at him directly. "You are right. Nobody can except us. And for 60 years we did it for free, and they spat in our faces the whole time. You want to keep bleeding for people who hate you for the blood? Danny did not have an answer for that. 3 weeks later, Longwatch Station was empty. The last transport ship pulled away, and Katie Marsh, standing on its bridge, watched the station grow smaller in the rear display. The lights were off. The docking bays were sealed. The harmonic disruptors, all 412 satellites that formed the containment grid, were dark. Behind the dead station, the rift pulsed. It looked brighter already. On Aethara Prime, the news arrived before any official announcement. Council intelligence services had been monitoring the sector, and when the disruptor network went offline, every sensor in 3 systems screamed at once. Delegate Vorath of the Shale Dominion called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. He stood at his podium, his mandibles clicking rapidly, and demanded that Ambassador Lena Garza explain what was happening. Lena stood in her usual place at the back of the chamber, where human representatives had always been seated, far from the center, far from the important species. She was calm. She was always calm. The United Earth government has made an internal policy decision to withdraw its forces from Sector 77 Kale, she said. This decision is effective immediately and is not subject to council review. The chamber erupted. 47 species all talking at once, their translators creating a wall of noise that made the walls vibrate. Delegate Yanni of the Pelori Communion managed to be heard above the chaos. She was small, amphibian, with large dark eyes that always looked slightly sad. She had been one of the few council members who consistently spoke in defense of humanity's work. Ambassador Garza, please, Yanni said, her voice cracking. My homeworld is 47 light-years from the sector boundary. Without the disruptor network, the Hollow will reach us within a standard year. Our people have no defense against them. None. Lena's expression softened. She liked Yanni. I understand your concern, Delegate. I am sorry. The decision is not mine to reverse. Then whose decision is it? Vorath demanded. The people of Earth, Lena said simply. Vorath bristled. This is blackmail. This is extortion. The humans are trying to force the Council to bow to their demands. Lena looked at him without blinking. What demands, Delegate? We have made no demands. We simply left. That was the moment when real fear entered the chamber, because she was right. Humanity had not asked for anything. They had not issued threats. They had not made conditions. They had just packed their bags and gone home. And that was somehow worse than any ultimatum. Vorath, rattled but unwilling to show it, announced that the Shale Dominion would handle the sector itself. He called it a matter of Shale honor. He assembled a scout squadron, 12 of the Dominion's fastest warships, crewed by experienced officers, and ordered them into the Forbidden Sector. 6 hours after entering the sector boundary, all 12 ships went silent. The Council sent search drones. The drones returned carrying a single corrupted data file. The file contained 17 seconds of video from the bridge of the lead ship. The footage showed the Shale crew in complete collapse. Officers were screaming in languages the translators could not process. Some were tearing at their own bodies with their claws. Others had turned on their crewmates. One officer was sitting in the corner of the bridge, staring at nothing, making a sound that was later described by a Pelori psychologist as the noise a mind makes when it has given up on being a mind. The footage was classified within minutes, but it leaked within hours. And when it did, the panic that had been building quietly in every council species became something much larger, much louder, and much harder to control. Vorath did not give any speeches that day. The rift was growing. Without the 412 harmonic disruptor satellites that humanity had maintained for 60 years, there was nothing to hold the tear in space in check. It expanded slowly at first, then faster, pushing outward like a wound pulling itself open. The faint, sickly glow that had once been contained to the deep center of the forbidden sector was now visible on long-range sensors in systems that had never registered it before. And the hollow came with it. Reports started arriving at Athara Prime within days of the human withdrawal. A Drenikai mining outpost on the edge of the sector detected strange energy readings and evacuated before anything appeared. A Vostari research vessel on routine patrol suffered sudden instrument failure and was forced to retreat. These were small incidents, easy to explain away. The Council tried. Then the hollow reached Tiavas. Tiavas was a Pelori agricultural world, a green and blue planet covered in vast fields and shallow oceans, where the Pelori grew the food that fed 3 of their colony systems. It was 44 light-years from the sector boundary, well within what had always been considered safe space. 700,000 people lived there, most of them farmers and their families. The hollow entity appeared in the outer orbit of Tiavas on a quiet morning. It was enormous, a dark, shifting mass that blocked the stars behind it, and sent waves of psychic energy washing over the planet below. It did not attack. It did not need to. Within an hour, the hospitals on Tiavas were full. People collapsed in the streets, clutching their heads, screaming about things they could see that were not there. Children woke from sleep and could not stop crying. Animals panicked and broke free from their pens, stampeding through farming towns. The Planetary Defense Force tried to organize, but half of its officers were too affected to stand. The governor of Tiavas ordered an immediate evacuation. 700,000 people tried to leave a planet through a spaceport built for 50,000. The crush at the port killed 209 people, including 38 children. The evacuation ships fled. The hollow entity remained in orbit, pulsing slowly, as if it was waiting. On Aethera Prime, the Galactic Council was falling apart. Emergency sessions ran day and night. Delegates shouted at each other in languages that the translation system struggled to keep up with. Military committees met behind closed doors and came out looking worse than when they went in. Reports from the sector boundary grew darker with every passing hour. The rift was now 30% larger than it had been when the humans left, and the rate of expansion was increasing. Delegate Vorath of the Shale Dominion sat in his chamber and stared at the reports on his screen. 12 ships, over 3,000 Shale soldiers, gone in 6 hours. He had sent them himself. He had stood on the council floor and boasted that Shale warriors would succeed where humans had merely survived. Now those warriors were dead, or worse than dead, and the footage of their final moments played behind his eyes every time he closed them. He had been the loudest voice against the humans for 15 years. He had called them thieves. He had called them warmongers. He had accused them of hoarding alien technology from the rift. He had blocked their council membership vote 7 times. And now the thing he had demanded, the removal of humans from the forbidden sector, had happened, and the galaxy was paying for it. Ambassador Lena Garza still came to the council sessions. She sat in the back of the chamber, in the same seat humanity had always been given, and watched the chaos with a face that revealed nothing. Delegates approached her constantly, some begging, some threatening, some simply staring at her, as if she held a switch that could fix everything. She told them all the same thing. I have communicated the council's concerns to my government. I am waiting for a response. The response did not come. Delegate Yanni of the Pelori Communion stopped sleeping. She spent her days in the council chamber, and her nights on communication channels with Pelori colony worlds, coordinating evacuation plans for planets that might be in the path of the Hollow's expansion. She had aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Her large dark eyes, once merely sad, now carried a hollowness that made people look away. She cornered Vorath in a corridor after a late session. He tried to walk past her. She blocked his path. She was half his size, and she did not move. "This is your doing," she said. Her voice was quiet and steady, and cut like a blade. "You spent 15 years telling everyone that humans were the enemy. You convinced half the council to block their membership. You accused them of crimes they never committed. And when they finally got tired of it and left, you sent your soldiers to die, trying to prove that we did not need them." She took a step closer. "We needed them, Vorath. We always needed them. And you made sure they knew we did not want them." Vorath said nothing. His mandibles hung still and silent. Far from Aethera Prime, at Outpost Brennan, the human garrison from Longwatch tried to settle into something like normal life. It was not working. Danny Voss sat in the mess hall and watched the news feeds from Council Space. He saw the footage from Tia Voss, the crowds at the spaceport, the bodies, the children being carried by parents who could barely walk straight. He saw the reports of the expanding rift. He saw the fear on faces that belonged to species he had never met, but had spent the last months of his life protecting. He pushed his food away and went to find Meg Kohler. She was in the gym, hitting a heavy bag with the slow, controlled rhythm of someone working through something that had no easy solution. Danny waited until she stopped. "I saw the news from Tia Voss," he said. Meg unwrapped her hands. "I saw it too. 200 people dead, Sarge. Kids, because we left." Meg looked at him. Her face was lined and tired, but her eyes were steady. "We bled for them for 60 years, Danny. 60 years, and they called us thieves and warmongers the whole time. You cannot save people who hate you for saving them. At some point, you have to let them learn what the dark looks like without you standing in front of it." Danny wanted to argue with her. He wanted to say that the people on Tia Voss never called anyone anything, that they were just farmers, that the kids who died at that spaceport had nothing to do with council politics. But the words stuck in his throat because he knew she was not wrong either. Dr. Paul Whitman worked through the nights at Outpost Brennan, analyzing the data he had brought from Longwatch. His models were getting worse. He ran them again and again, hoping for a different result, and every time the numbers came back uglier. The rift was expanding faster than anything in his predictions had suggested. Without the disruptor network, the growth was not linear, it was accelerating. He brought his findings to Commander Hadley in a small briefing room with no windows. 6 months, Paul said. In 6 months, the rift doubles in size. In 18 months, the Hollow will be able to reach the inner council territories. In 3 years, they reach Aethera Prime itself. Hadley stared at the data on the screen. "Are you sure about this?" "I have run the models 9 times. I am sure." Hadley sent the report to the United Earth Defense Council with a single recommendation: re-engage. The response came back 12 hours later. It was 1 line long. Recommendation noted. Stand by for further orders. Back on Aethera Prime, Delegate Yanni stood before the full council and did something that had never been done in the history of the body. She introduced a motion to formally request military assistance from a single species. The motion asked the Galactic Council to send a delegation to Earth and ask humanity to come back. The debate lasted 3 days. Some delegates said it would set a dangerous precedent. Others said it would confirm that humanity was the dominant power in the galaxy, and that every other species was dependent on them. The Dranaki representative argued that the Council should develop its own solution, rather than beg the humans for help. When asked what that solution might be, he had no answer. On the final day, Yanni stood again and spoke to Vorath directly. "Every word you said about the humans is now being tested, Delegate. You said they were not needed. They were. You said others could do what they did. They cannot. You said they were the threat. She gestured toward the displays, showing the expanding rift. There is the threat. It was always there, and the only thing standing between it and us is gone because we drove it away. The vote was close. 31 in favor, 16 against. The motion passed. A delegation was assembled. They would go to Earth. They would ask the humans to come back, and they had no idea what it would cost them. The delegation arrived at Earth on a cold morning. Their ship, a sleek Council diplomatic vessel, dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system, and was immediately met by 4 human warships. The warships did not point their weapons at the delegation, but they did not move aside either. They waited until the delegation transmitted proper identification codes, and then they escorted the vessel in, slowly, carefully, the way a person might lead a stranger through their home, while keeping one eye on them the whole time. Delegate Yanni stood at the viewport and watched the blue planet grow larger. She had never been to Earth before. It was smaller than she had expected. Most Council species came from larger worlds, and there was something almost absurd about the idea that this little ball of water and rock had produced the only species capable of surviving the Forbidden Sector. Beside her, Delegate Vorath stood rigid and silent. He had not wanted to come. The Shale Dominion's ruling council had told him he was going, and they had told him why. He was the face of anti-human politics in the galaxy. His presence on this delegation was meant to send a message. He understood the message. He hated it. The ship landed at a military facility outside the city of Geneva. Not the diplomatic quarter. Not the grand halls where visiting species were usually received. A military base, with armed guards and gray buildings, and the quiet hum of machinery. Yanni noted the choice and understood it. The humans were not treating this as a social visit. They were met on the landing pad by 2 people. Secretary of Defense Kevin Holt was a tall man in his 60s with white hair cut short, and a face that looked like it had been designed specifically to give nothing away. He shook hands with each delegate in the human fashion. Beside him stood General Lisa Caldwell, commander of Earth's deep space operations. She was shorter than Holt, with sharp eyes and the kind of posture that said she had spent her entire life in uniform, and had never once been uncomfortable in it. "Welcome to Earth," Holt said. His voice was polite. It was not warm. The negotiations began that afternoon in a conference room with no decorations on the walls. The delegates sat on one side of a long table. Holt and Caldwell sat on the other. Ambassador Lena Garza was present, but seated slightly apart, serving as a bridge between the 2 groups. Yanni spoke first. She had prepared carefully, and she spoke from the heart. She described the situation on Tiavas, the evacuation, the deaths, the children. She described the expanding rift and the hollow entities pushing deeper into Council space every day. She described the fear that had taken hold of dozens of species across hundreds of worlds. And then, she did something that no Council delegate had ever done before in front of human officials. She apologized. "We were wrong," she said. Her translator rendered the words in English, but the emotion behind them needed no translation. "For 60 years, your people protected us, and we repaid you with suspicion and insults. We questioned your motives. We blocked your progress. We treated you as a threat when you were the only thing standing between us and destruction. I cannot undo what was done. I can only tell you that I am sorry, and that I am asking, not demanding, asking for your help." The room was quiet. Holt listened without expression. Caldwell watched the delegates the way a soldier watches a perimeter, not hostile, but very alert. Vorath was supposed to speak next. He sat in his chair with his mandibles pulled tight against his face, his body rigid. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he reached into a case beside him and pulled out a data tablet. He placed it on the table. The Shale Dominion has prepared a formal statement of regret regarding its past positions on human operations in the Forbidden Sector, he said. The words came out flat, mechanical, as if each one had been pulled from him by force. We acknowledge that our objections were not supported by evidence, and that our public statements caused harm to the relationship between the Dominion and Earth. It was not a good apology. It was not even a warm one. But from Vorath, it was remarkable. Holt nodded once, then opened a folder on the table in front of him. He slid a document across to the delegates. It was thick, several pages long, and the title at the top read, The Brennan Accords. We appreciate the delegation's words, Holt said. We also believe that words by themselves are not enough. 1,100 human lives lost in the Forbidden Sector. Trillions of credits spent from our own economy. We did this freely, and we would do it again, but not under the same conditions as before. He gestured to the document. These are our terms. The delegates read. The room stayed silent, except for the quiet clicking of Vorath's mandibles, which grew faster as he moved through the pages. The terms were clear and specific. First, the Council would formally recognize humanity's 60-year contribution to galactic security. This recognition would be read aloud on the Council floor and entered into permanent record. Not a private note, not a quiet footnote, a public statement heard by every species in the galaxy. Second, humanity would receive full voting membership on the Galactic Council. This was something that had been blocked for over 40 years by procedural objections, many of them filed by the Shale Dominion. The blocks would be removed immediately. Third, a joint security framework would be established for the Forbidden Sector. Humanity would retain operational command, but Council species would contribute funding, resources, and personnel wherever their biology allowed. No more free rides. Fourth, 17 trade routes currently closed to human ships by Council regulation would be opened without restriction. Fifth, the Shale Dominion would issue a formal public apology for its decades-long campaign of disinformation against human operations in the sector. Not a statement of regret, an apology. Vorath looked up from the document. His mandibles were clicking so fast that the sound was almost a buzz. This fifth condition is designed to humiliate the Dominion. Holt looked at him without blinking. The fifth condition is designed to correct the record, delegate. Your government spent 15 years telling the galaxy that our people were stealing from the rift. That was a lie. Lies should be corrected publicly. Vorath stood. His chair scraped against the floor. This is not a negotiation. This is a list of demands. General Caldwell spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet and did not rise above conversational volume. Delegate, you are free to leave at any time. No one is forcing the Council to accept these terms. You came to us. If the terms are unacceptable, we understand. We wish you well in managing the sector on your own. The room went very still. Everyone in it knew what managing the sector on their own meant. It meant death. It meant the hollow pouring out of the rift and washing over Council space like a tide. It meant the end of everything. Vorath sat back down. Yanni read the document again, more carefully. Then she looked at Holt and said, "We need time to consult with our governments." "Of course," Holt said. "Take as much time as you need." The delegation withdrew to their quarters. Communications were sent to Athara Prime and to the capitals of every major Council species. The debate was fierce but short, because while the delegates argued, reality was still moving. 2 more hollow entities were detected near populated systems. One of them, a massive thing, larger than any previously recorded, descended toward the atmosphere of a Dranaki colony world. The Dranaki Third Fleet moved to intercept it with 9 warships. The battle lasted 52 minutes. All 9 ships were destroyed. The entity was damaged but not killed, and it continued its descent. The Dranaki representative on the delegation received this news in the middle of a heated argument against the trade route provisions. He stopped talking. He stared at his screen for a long time. Then he looked at the other delegates and said, "Accept the terms." The delegation returned to the conference room the next morning. Minor modifications were discussed and agreed upon. The core terms remained unchanged. Vorath read the formal apology himself. He stood straight, his mandibles still, his voice controlled. He read every word as written, clearly and without emotion. When he finished, he sat down and did not speak again for the rest of the session. Lena Garza watched from her seat. Later, she told Katie Marsh in a private message that she thought Vorath was feeling both shame and rage at the same time. She said she almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The Brennan Accords were signed that afternoon. Secretary Holt shook hands with each delegate. General Caldwell gave a brief nod. And somewhere in the offices of the Earth Defense Council, orders were already being written. Humanity was going back to the dark. The fleet was larger this time. Commander Sam Hadley stood on the bridge of the carrier ship Steadfast and watched his forces assemble at the staging point near Outpost Brennan. Under the old Long Watch mission, he had commanded 4,000 people. The new Combined Sector Defense Force numbered 6,000 human personnel, plus support teams from a dozen council species. Pelori engineers who could build structures in zero gravity faster than anyone in the galaxy. Tivrani medics whose knowledge of trauma care was unmatched. Logistical crews from species whose names Danny Voss could not yet pronounce, but whose cargo ships were already loaded and waiting. Even the Shale Dominion had contributed. A squadron of heavy transport ships, painted in the dark red of the Dominion fleet, sat at the edge of the formation. Their crews would rotate out before the fleet entered the sector. Shale biology could not handle the psychic pressure. For the first time in 60 years, humanity was not going into the dark alone. Katie Marsh, newly promoted to full commander, stood beside Hadley and reviewed the operational plan on her tablet. Her promotion had been one of Hadley's first requests when he received the new command, and nobody had argued. She knew Long Watch better than anyone alive, and what they were about to do would need every bit of that knowledge. "The rift has expanded by 41% since we left," she said, scrolling through the latest sensor data. "Hollow activity is at levels we have not seen since the first decade of the original mission. We are going to have a rough first few weeks." Hadley nodded. "We knew that. We planned for it." "Plans and reality are not always friends, sir." He almost smiled. "No, they are not." Down in the troop quarters, Danny Voss checked his gear for the third time. He had volunteered for the return mission within an hour of the announcement. He did not think about it. He did not weigh the risks. He just walked to the recruitment office and put his name down. When asked why, he said, "Because somebody has to." Meg Kohler had been 2 days away from filing her retirement papers when she heard Danny had signed up. She tore the papers in half, re-enlisted, and found Danny in the mess hall that evening. "You are an idiot," she told him. "Yes, Sarge. Someone has to keep you alive. Apparently that someone is me." "Yes, Sarge." She sat down across from him, and for the first time Danny could remember, she was almost smiling. The fleet entered the Forbidden Sector on a Tuesday. Danny always remembered that it was a Tuesday because Meg had made a joke about it. "Tuesdays," she said over the squad channel, as the stars outside their viewport began to take on the faint, wrong-colored tint that meant they were inside the boundary. "The worst things always happen on Tuesdays." The sector was worse than any of them expected. The rift, which had once been a distant wound visible only from certain angles, now dominated the viewport. It stretched across the sky like a jagged scar, pulsing with light that made Danny's eyes water if he looked at it too long. The headache started almost immediately, that familiar dull pressure behind his forehead, that was the only sign of the psychic energy that would have destroyed any non-human mind within hours. Hollow entities were everywhere. The patrols encountered them within the first hour. Dark, swirling masses drifting through the void, some the size of shuttles, some the size of buildings. The Marines engaged with pulse lances and harmonic rounds, and the old rhythms of combat came back quickly. Fire. Watch the thing shudder. Fire again. Watch it break apart. Move to the next one. The first week was brutal. The second was worse. Equipment designed for containment operations had to be rebuilt for what was essentially a war. Power systems failed under the strain of constant disruptor deployment. 3 Marines were injured when a hollow entity breached the hull of a patrol ship. Sleep became a memory that people talked about the way they talked about good weather back home. But humanity did what it had always done. It adapted, it held, it fought. Dr. Paul Whitman arrived on the rebuilt Longwatch station, now called Longwatch Brennan, with 200 cases of equipment and the look of a man who had not slept in a month. He set up his research lab in the same room he had used for years, plugged in his instruments, and started working. What he found changed everything. The data from the expanded rift was different from anything he had seen before. The rift was not simply a hole in space, not just a random wound in the fabric of reality. It was a boundary, a membrane between dimensions, a wall separating normal space from something on the other side. And the Hollow were not invaders. They were not monsters that came through the tear to destroy. They were something much stranger. They were a response, a defense mechanism. The membrane itself was generating them, pushing them out the way a body pushes out white blood cells to fight an infection. The rift had been growing because the membrane was weakening, and the Hollow had been becoming more aggressive because they were, in their own alien and incomprehensible way, afraid. Paul presented his findings to Hadley and Katie in the commander's office. His hands were shaking with excitement and exhaustion. "We have been thinking about this wrong for 60 years, he said. "We have been treating the Hollow as the enemy. They are not the enemy. The weakening membrane is the problem. If we can strengthen the membrane, the rift contracts. The Hollow calmed down. Everything gets better." "How do we strengthen a membrane between dimensions?" Katie asked. "The harmonic disruptors, they already interact with the membrane. That is why they work to suppress the Hollow. If we modify the frequency, tune it to reinforce the membrane instead of just disrupting the Hollow, we could shrink the rift to a fraction of its current size. Maybe permanently." Hadley looked at the data for a long time. "How confident are you?" 80%. "And the other 20? Paul paused. "The other 20% says it does not work, and the Hollow get very angry that we tried." Hadley made the call. The operation would go forward. It took 3 weeks to modify the disruptor satellites and calculate the precise positions where they needed to be placed around the rift's perimeter. Each satellite had to be anchored at an exact point, and the margin for error was less than 50 meters. The engineering teams worked around the clock. The Pelori builders, who could weld in vacuum faster than any human, proved invaluable. Danny watched them work and felt something he had not expected: gratitude for allies he had never had before. The deployment day came. Danny's squad was part of the Marine escort for the engineering team placing the final ring of satellites closest to the rift. It was the most dangerous position, right at the edge of the tear, where the psychic pressure was strongest and the Hollow were thickest. They fought their way in. The Hollow came at them with a fury that none of the veterans had ever experienced. The creatures seemed to know what was happening. They threw themselves at the escort ships in waves, screaming inside the minds of every Marine with that silent, skull-deep pressure that made the world go sideways. Danny fired his pulse lance until the battery died, swapped it for another, and fired again. Beside him, Meg Kohler directed the squad with calm, sharp commands, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. Then, one of the hollow broke through the line. It hit Meg's position with a focused burst of psychic energy that no human should have been able to feel that strongly. She went down like someone had cut her strings, eyes rolling back, body limp, blood running from her nose. He grabbed her, threw her over his shoulder, and ran for the medevac shuttle. He carried her through 200 meters of corridor while the station shook around him, and alarms screamed from every direction. He did not put her down until the medics took her from him. And even then he stayed at the shuttle door until they told him she was stable. "She will be fine," the medic said. 3 days unconscious, maybe, but she will be fine. Danny nodded. His hands were shaking. He picked up a fresh pulse lance, walked back to the line, and kept fighting. The last satellite locked into position at 1400 hours station time. Paul Whitman, watching from the command center, gave the order. The modified disruptors activated. The effect was visible to the naked eye. The rift, that massive pulsing wound in the sky, shuddered. It rippled. And then slowly, like a door being pushed shut by a steady hand, it began to contract. The sickly glow dimmed. The pressure in every human skull eased, and the hollow, the dark swirling things that had been throwing themselves at the fleet with mindless fury, stopped. They hovered in place for a long moment, as if listening to something only they could hear. And then they pulled back, retreating into the rift, disappearing into the shrinking tear like water draining from a sink. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Forbidden Sector was quiet. Commander Sam Hadley stood on the observation deck of Long Watch Brennan and looked at the rift. It was still there, a thin line of faint light, like a scar that had finally healed over. It was stable. It was manageable. It was not gone, and it might never be. But it was no longer a wound. It was just a mark. Katie stood beside him. Neither of them spoke for a long time. On Athara Prime, Delegate Yanni read the human mission report to the full Galactic Council. She read every word, including the part about the 11 humans who had died during the reactivation operation. When she spoke their names, the chamber fell silent. For the first time that anyone could remember, the silence did not feel like indifference or suspicion or resentment. It felt like respect. Ambassador Lena Garza sat in humanity's new permanent council chair. Front row, center section, right where it should have been all along. She did not speak during the session. She did not need to. The chair said everything. Danny Voss, back on duty, sat in his quarters that evening and wrote a letter to his mother in Ohio. He told her the posting was hard, but that it was getting better. He told her he had friends who looked out for him. He told her he thought they were doing something that mattered, something real, and that he was proud to be part of it. He told her he would try to call next week. He told her he loved her. Meg Kohler was released from medical with a clean bill of health and a commendation that she folded up and shoved in her locker without looking at. She returned to patrol rotation the next day as if nothing had happened. When Danny asked her if she regretted coming back, she looked out the viewport at the thin, quiet line of light where the rift used to scream. "Somebody has to stand in front of the dark, Danny," she said. "Might as well be us." The rift held. The galaxy moved forward. And humanity remained. Not because anyone asked them to, not because anyone thanked them, but because it was the right thing to do, and because they were the only ones who could. It had always been that simple. For 60 years, humans had lived and worked inside a region of space that every other species in the galaxy feared. The Galactic Council called it the Forbidden Sector. On official star maps, it was listed as Sector 77 Kale. But most spacefaring species simply called it the Dark, and they had good reason to stay away. At the center of the sector, there was a tear in space itself. It stretched across millions of miles, and it glowed with a faint, sickly light that shifted between colors no eye was built to see. The tear was old. No one knew how old. Some scientists believed it had been there since before the first council species learned to make fire. From inside that tear came the hollow, massive, shapeless things that drifted through space like living storms. They ate ships, they poisoned planets, and worst of all, they broke the minds of anyone who stayed near them for too long. Every council species had tried to deal with the hollow at some point in history. The Shale Dominion had sent their best warships. The Polari Communion had sent their greatest scientists. The Drenaki Hegemony had tried to seal the rift with explosives so powerful they cracked a nearby moon in half. Nothing worked. The hollow kept coming, and anyone who entered the sector came back screaming or did not come back at all. Then the humans arrived. Nobody on the council had paid much attention to the small blue world called Earth when its people first reached the stars. Humans were loud. They were messy. They fought among themselves constantly. But they had one quality that no one expected and no one could explain. The hollow could not break their minds. Where other species went mad within days, humans felt only a dull headache and a strange feeling in their gut. Their scientists called it mild psychic resistance. Their soldiers called it a bad Tuesday. 60 years ago, without being asked, a human fleet had entered the Forbidden Sector, built a military station at the edge of the rift, and started fighting the hollow. They called the station Long Watch. They set up a network of satellites around the rift that sent out a special energy signal. Harmonic disruptors, they called them, that kept the hollow weak and contained. And for 60 years, they had kept the rest of the galaxy safe. Nobody thanked them for it. Commander Sam Hadley stood at the main viewport of Long Watch Station and looked out at the rift. He had been looking at it for 6 years, across 2 separate tours of duty. It never got easier to see. The thing was ugly in a way that went deeper than appearance. It was wrong, like a wound that refused to heal. And even with the disruptors running at full power, it still made the back of his neck itch. He was a tall man with gray at his temples, and the kind of quiet confidence that came from decades of military service. He did not raise his voice often because he rarely needed to. His crew respected him, and that was enough. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Commander Katie Marsh, walked up beside him. She was younger, sharper in her manner, and kept the station running with the kind of organized energy that Hadley relied on more than he would ever admit. "Patrol 7 is back," she said. "Clean sweep, no contact." Hadley nodded. "That is 3 clean patrols in a row. The disruptors must be running well." "They are," Katie said. "Paul says the energy readings from the rift are the lowest he has seen in 2 years. Paul was Dr. Paul Whitman, the station's chief researcher. He had spent more time studying the rift than any living person, and had published more papers on the hollow than most people had read books in their entire lives. Down in the lower levels of the station, Corporal Danny Voss sat in the mess hall with his squad and tried to look calm. He was 23 years old, and this was his first deployment to the Forbidden Sector. Everything about the place made him uneasy. The low hum that ran through the walls, the way shadows seemed to move just slightly wrong in the corners of his vision, the knowledge that on the other side of a few layers of metal and energy shielding, there were things floating in the dark that could swallow a warship whole. His squad leader, Sergeant Meg Kohler, sat across from him eating her food like it was any other day. She had been to Long Watch 3 times. She had seen things that she did not talk about, and carried them with the quiet strength of someone who had made peace with the weight a long time ago. "You are thinking too much," Meg said without looking up from her plate. "I am not thinking at all," Danny said. "That is even worse." She looked up at him then, and her eyes were not unkind. "Relax, Voss. The disruptors are working. The patrols are clean. This is a good day. Danny wanted to believe her. He tried. 12 hours later, the day stopped being good. The alarm hit at 0300 station time. Danny was asleep and then he was not, rolling out of his bunk and grabbing his gear with the muscle memory of training. Meg was already suited up and moving down the corridor, her face set in the hard expression Danny had only seen in drills. 3 contacts, she said over the squad channel. They broke through the outer perimeter. Danny's stomach dropped, but his hands kept moving. He sealed his suit, checked his pulse lens, and followed Meg to the deployment bay. The fight lasted 40 minutes. 3 hollow entities, each one a swirling mass of dark energy the size of a small building, had pushed through a weak point in the disruptor grid. The Marines engaged them in open space, firing harmonic rounds that made the creatures shudder and pull back. Danny fired his weapon and watched the bolts hit one of the things, and it screamed, not with sound, but with a pressure inside his skull that made his vision blur and his teeth ache. They killed all 3. No human casualties. Danny sat in the debrief room afterward, with his hands shaking slightly and sweat drying on his face. Meg sat down next to him. First real fight? He nodded. You did fine. The ones who stop being scared are the ones who get sloppy. Far away, on the Council capital world of Aethera Prime, Ambassador Lena Garza sat in the Great Chamber and listened to Delegate Vorath of the Shael Dominion give another speech about how humans could not be trusted. He was tall, insectoid, with sharp mandibles that clicked when he was excited. He had been giving speeches like this for 15 years. The humans are hiding something in that sector, Vorath declared to the chamber. They claim to protect us, but no species guards a wasteland for 60 years without taking something for themselves. Lena did not flinch. She had heard it all before. She stood as was her right and replied calmly. Every quarterly research report from Longwatch is available to every council member. Every patrol log, every scientific finding. If the delegate would like to read them, I would be happy to send copies, again. Vorath's mandibles clicked in irritation. That evening, Commander Hadley sat alone in his quarters and opened a classified message from Earth. He read it once. He read it again. He sat very still for a long time. Then he called Katie Marsh to his office. When she arrived, he looked at her and said, "We have new orders. Start packing. We are going home." Katie stared at him. Home? What about the sector? Hadley's jaw tightened. The sector is no longer our problem. Outside the viewport, the rift pulsed in the dark, patient and endless.